Shalom and welcome to Practical Spirituality here at Asia Torah in the Old City of Jerusalem overlooking the Temple Mount. Today we're discussing a little bit of the end of days and the basic message that I'm giving is that you need to have a plan how you're moving to Israel, and to not have that plan would be the same as not wearing a seatbelt in a car or not having health insurance or life insurance or not using smoke detectors. Meaning it's just simply irresponsible. And it's irresponsible for several reasons. One, historically, is that we've been spat out of every host country we've ever been in. And so whatever countries Jews are today that are not Israel, it's just a matter of time. And two is, Jewishly, we all believe in the prophets. And the prophets, even if you're Jewish, you're probably in one level or another, aligning your life with the prophecies of Israel. I keep Shabbat, that's a prophet. The prophets say, don't do these 39 things every Shabbat. So that's prophecy. I wear tzitzis because of prophecy. My life's aligned with the prophecies. That's why we're doing what we're doing, is because we believe in those prophecies. But those same prophecies also say that, thank you so much, that there's going to be a messianic era where the Jewish people will come back to the land of Israel. There will be an ingathering of the exiles of the Jewish people, and there'll also be there could be massive wars. There probably will be massive Armageddon battles. That's called the Armageddon. Yeah. What did Bob Marley say about Armageddon? What song is that? One Love. Let's get together and feel. Let's get it together now and fight this holy Armageddon. One love. 'Cause when Mashiach comes, there will be no more tears. One heart. And here's like Bob Marley's warning. Have pity on those whose chances grow thinner. There ain't no hiding place from the Father of creation. And a lot of people think they can hide. But you can't hide. I mean, God's orchestrating everything in your life. You think you're going to hide? So it says in the prophet Zechariah, and by the way, we read this during Sukkot holiday because Sukkot holiday is where you show your trust. Meaning you just got through with Yom Kippur. You're at the height of your faith in God. But what's applied faith? Trust. Applied faith is trust. Meaning when you marry, you now have trust. Yeah? Sorry, when you're married, you now have faith in each other. And how do you show that? Through trust. By trusting you, you've now applied your faith. And so too with God, you have faith in God. How you apply that is trust. And in the end of days, though, it's going to be, I'll read from Zechariah, but it's going to be a pretty scary time. And you may not have your trust there for you in the panic of it all. Because when you panic. Like you just freeze. And I've had it happen to me. The first time I was held up at gunpoint, I panicked. I didn't say Shema, nothing. I just panicked. I froze. And I have to tell you, I was pretty embarrassed about it afterwards. Thank God I lived. I mean, it was a good thing I lived. And I was the first one who lived from these particular gangsters in a month. Every single night, they mugged and killed their victim. Every single night that month. I was the first one who wasn't. Because when I was in execution position on my knees and face on the ground with a gun at the back of my head, which is how they killed the other people for the last 29 days straight. It was in an alley, late at night, a dark alley. A car drove by right behind and saw them. saw the three guys. By the way, there were two other students of mine with guns in their head. They were talking to me outside the class I had just given. And it was in Los Angeles. But a car drove by and saw the whole scene. So the guys realized they're in trouble. So they just ran. They just in a panic and ran. And we were the first people not killed by them. And anyway, but it was very embarrassing. I really froze. And by the way, the term to have something scared out of you is true. I didn't know that was, I thought it was just something you say. But it's actually real, which is really not a nice thing to know about firsthand. But that's how bad freezing can get. Anyway, but it was very interesting is the second time I was held up at gunpoint, I took the guy down. I pointed his gun away from the people, and I took him down and held him until everyone came and took over. Very different response very different response. I should have frozen like the first time, but I guess I needed one practice run for the second time.
Where was the second one?
I don't want to reveal too many details about the first nor the second, and nor the location of the second specifically. But I don't talk too much. People almost have never heard these stories before, and I don't share these very often. And but one more interesting thing about that first story is my PTSD after that was really bad. So I was running red lights because I'd stop at the red light, but the second another car pulled up next to me, I was sure he was going to kill me. That's how bad PTSD can be. And so I would just look both ways and go through the red light. That was the normal thing. If a cop had stopped me, I would just tell him, like, the guy next to me was going to kill me. And that's why I ran the red light. You saw I stopped to check. I stopped and checked. The killer pulled up next to me, and I moved on.
How did you get over that?
So, yeah, how I got over it was really fascinating was when I understood, it was the weirdest thing, but when I understood why I had to get held up at gunpoint, which was only a few days later, when I realized why I had to get held up at gunpoint, like why this whole thing was from God, and like there was no coincidences, and this crime had my name initialed into it. It was engraved with me being at that time for that altercation. When I realized what the story was really all about, you want to know what the story was? It's a really strange story, but I was in Sfat, and 6 months earlier I was in Sfat, and I was listening to a great Kabbalist, Rav Lezer Koenig Zatzal, was giving a class in third meal in Sfat, and it was about two types of dirt: the dirt of the land of Israel and the dirt of outside the land of Israel. And he was talking about humility, because when we pray, we say, may I be like the dust of the earth before all others. Yeah, people should see me as the dust of the earth, meaning no ego. But the rabbi was teaching this teaching, which I didn't understand at the time. And he was teaching this teaching that the dust of the outside of Israel is impure dust, whereas the dust in the land of, the earth of the land of Israel is holy dust. It's the holy dirt. And what does it mean? What's the difference in humility? So he said that non-holy dirt is to think you're nothing, which to Jewish people is like spitting in God's face, because he's who made you amazing. How you're so amazing is from God. And for you to see yourself as nothing is spitting in God's face, and that's the impure dirt of outside of Israel. That's the false humility that the Gentiles believe in. And whereas the Jewish is the holy dirt of Israel, the holy soil of our country. And that is that you're awesome and God is why. You're awesome and God is why you're awesome. And you have to live that way. And then you get the miracles, like the miracles of God only hit the person who realizes they're awesome. You know why? Because, see, once you realize you're awesome, like let's take this guy in the back. What's your name?
David.
Let's say David. Finally, it gets into his bones and his thick head and his stone heart that he's. I don't know if he's got a thick head or, but let's just say David. It finally penetrates David how awesome you are. Well, then what's going to happen? You're stuck now because now you got to go do awesome things. But the problem is the world's not set up for the awesome David, who's going to do all the things that an awesome person does. Well, but what are you going to do? So you're not going to do the awesome things because the world's not set up for that? The answer is no. You're going to go do those awesome things, and you're going to watch what's called LSD, which stands for Large Siyata Dishmaya. You're going to get divine providence coming your way in a big way, large helpings of divine providence. And then you'll be living in a relationship with God, which is called the world of wonder world, which is called Olam HaPeleh. But all of us people who don't realize how awesome we are, and therefore we live in another world called Olam HaTeva, the world of nature. But God expects all of us to live in the world of wonder, in the wonder world. He expects it from us. That's why whenever you say Modim Anachnu Lach and you mention the wonders that happen, B'chol Eis Erev Vocha B'Tzorayim, it's all day, all night, in the evening, like it's 24/7 wonders. Well, the only way you experience 24/7 wonders is if you're always pushing the envelope with how awesome you are. If you keep pushing the envelope by doing the things that awesome people do, well, God has to pull out the wonders. And that's why we say every single day we give thanks for the wonders. But you know what? It's a bit of that prayer is in vain. You're using that prayer in vain if you're not getting those wonders because you're just not pushing. You're not pushing through things with your how awesome you are. Anyway, so that was the rabbi's class, was the two types of dirt. The dirt of outside of Israel, which is the false humility of being nothing, which again is spitting in God's face. And then the dirt of the Holy Land. And our by the way, our dirt is so holy. So holy. You know, after I mountain bike and I'm covered in dirt, I'm always reluctant to wash my clothes because of that dirt. I remember once this rabbi was Rabbi Moshe Weinberger, the Eish Kodesh from the Five Towns from Woodmere, New York. He was visiting here, and I walked into his third meal. I walked like a half hour to where he's doing a third meal. And he shares this amazing Torah that from the words of Yehuda speaking to Joseph, he says to him, Ki ech ele el avi v'hanar enenu iti. How can I go up to my father, meaning Jacob, when the child isn't with me? Because Joseph, who was the prince of Egypt, they didn't recognize him. He had incarcerated the youngest boy, Benjamin. And Yehuda took responsibility to return Benjamin back to Jacob. And his final plea with Joseph was, Ech ele el avi. How can I go up to my father? Make a chair, please, for this lady. How can I go up to my father when the child isn't with me? And what did Rabbi Weinberger say? He says, how can I go up to my father? That's God. And who's the child? That's your beautiful child, the awesome you, that amazing 2-year-old. It's that toddler full of power and energy and courage and self-expression and love and you know, and health and all the greatness that you are was embodied by you when you were 2 years old. And so he was bringing out this lesson that we all have to retrieve that child inside of us. But there was no dry eye in the room. It was in the dark. I mean, it was like dimly lit. And I was just crying over my child that I had left behind. And everyone in the room was basically crying while he shared his Torahs. When he finished sharing this Torah, I saw there was a little kid laying on his chair, but he was laying on his father's lap, but with his feet on the chair. And it was winter, and there was mud on his shoes. And I was looking at the mud on his shoes, and it made me cry even more. How holy the mud is. That's the mud of Israel. That's a kid playing on the land of Israel, on the soil, that's now caught between the crannies of his sole of his shoe. And that land is so holy. so special. Like I want to like scrape a little off and like put it in a little empty out a vitamin capsule and take it every morning.
So listen, how's that the reason why you were held at gunpoint?
Yeah, so why I was held up at gunpoint is after third meal, I made this big prayer for like a half hour straight. I was praying to God during the Mariv prayer in Sfat after this teaching, which I didn't understand, that God, please show me the difference between the holy soil and the soil outside the land of Israel, the false humility. Show me the difference. Like, please, by the way, don't try this at home. Don't ask God for firsthand lessons, because you may get one. But that's what I did. I was young and dumb. It was so many years ago. It was like the stupidest thing I ever did. But anyway, I made this big heartfelt prayer with tears and like, God, show me the difference between the false humility and the land, the soil outside of Israel and the soil in Israel of proper humility. And so I was a young married, learning in Kollel and learning yeshiva, and we went out to visit my wife's parents and my parents. We were just a young couple. I think we had 2 kids at the time. And when we visited my parents, Aisha Torah LA asked if I could teach a class. I never taught classes yet, besides what Aish makes you do when you're a student here. But yeah, I never so I figured it was like probably a couple donors learn once a week. So I was going to sit with a couple men and teach or whatever. So I get to the class, and who do I see? 200. I see 200 kids between the ages of 20 and 30, totally secular, in a full social scene. And it was actually called 20-something. And that's what they were asking me to teach. I didn't prepare nothing. I thought I was going to sit with a couple guys in a room and open up a chumash. I was like a deer in headlights. So I told them, don't even introduce me. I ran out to my car. I grabbed a guitar. So I'll hide behind this guitar. And I played a really slow Devekus Nigun. And it was silent. And then I played a fast, fun Nigun song. Nigun means a melody.
Can you play for us as well?
I would, but I ain't got no guitar. Anyway, and then I taught for the next hour and a half. An amazing class, which I'm not going to go into that, but it was an amazing class. And it really was the feedback was so intense that they asked me to take the whole group skiing the following weekend, which we did. And Big Bear, yeah. And the girls all came back with their hair covered. And my wife was pleading with them, like, you don't have to cover your hair. Like, you're single. Like, married women cover their hair. They all came back to LA, their hair covered. All the men decided they're keeping Shabbat now. And like, they never had anything like this happen there in the history of HLA. So next thing I know, it's Sunday morning. We're back in LA. And I get a call, can I come in Monday morning to speak to the staff of Aisha Torah? So I go into that meeting and they're like, 3-bedroom home, 2 cars, however many thousands of dollars a month salary. You're in charge of these people. Like, we're giving you a job. And I was like, I'm living in 2 rooms in Jerusalem where like one room has enough room for a table and the other room has enough room for our bed, an accordion partition, and another bed where 2 kids sleep in the same bed. And in Jerusalem, we're having like an epidemic of rabbis. So like, I make no difference in Jerusalem. Like there was no point in me being here as a rabbi. I still wasn't even a rabbi. And so all of a sudden I went from like nobody to like the king of LA. And I totally got caught up in that. I got caught up in which kind of dirt? The dirt, unholy dirt, pretending to be this humble servant of God, but really, relishing in my new position as king of Los Angeles. So of course I took the job, and like, you know, we were just like the following day. Sorry, the couple days of negotiations, because like we're not Mormons who just go out and like convert everybody for free. Like we actually negotiate contracts, Jewish, unless you're Chabad. You know, Chabad are like the only outreach rabbis in the world who rough it. You know, Aish Torah rabbis need to have a nice plush job. So the problem is when you the majority of people who got traction with Aish Torah way back when were from pretty affluent families, and so when the guy finally becomes a rabbi, he's like a spoiled little brat, you know, and needs this big contract and stuff. Anyway, so we finished negotiating Tuesday. Wednesday I signed. That night was the 20-something. That night I was in the alley talking to two boys who needed gunpoint. They needed gunpoint badly. They had both, one had learned in Aish Torah for about half a year. The other had learned in Or Sameach. They were both in deep trouble in their lives. Like they both had, clearly because they left this place when they weren't supposed to, God is just not showing them favor. They were getting thrashed badly. And that's why they wanted to talk to me after class, was to say like I need to get back to, I was basically saying to them, you need to go back to Or Sameach, you need to go back to Aish Torah, or you're going to die here. You know, I was basically telling them like, you can't be here anymore. At which point I saw three big hoodlums coming down the alley in the dark. And I was like, I'm holding the cash box from that night. 200 people paying like $10 each. You know, it's like $2,000. So I was thinking, with these guys walking down the alley, maybe I had to go put that cash box around. So I go around one of these students' cars to put the cash box in the next door office across the alley. But I was already flanked by one of the hoodlums who just put a gun right in my stomach. The other two were already at gunpoint. He puts me back over there, takes all our stuff, clears out his car, cash box is gone. It's gone. And next thing we know, we're in execution position with all three of us guns in our heads. Right when they put those guns on our heads, a car drives by. And here I am with this terrible PTSD. Oh, I should tell the rest of the story. I went back home that night to my wife. We just have this new position, you know. We're signing tomorrow. And I changed my underwear before I woke her up. And I woke her up and told her what happened to me. And she's like, call the Rebbe. And I'm like, why? And she's like, call the Rebbe. So I called Yerushalayim to the Prince Karlina Rebbe Zatzal. It's an old, great Hasidic master. And he's on the phone with me. I tell him I was held up at gunpoint. And the Rebbe says, be more careful out there. And my wife my wife only hears me, so I'm like, I'll be more careful, Rebbe. She grabs the phone, crying into the phone. Rebbe, we're not ready to be out here. He's not even ready. He's not a rabbi yet even. Like, please give us a blessing. We can come home, please. And she's L.A. She's crying into the phone. And he says, give your husband back the phone. I get back on the phone and the Rebbe's like, Yom Tov, you're coming home. I woke up the next morning, I get a phone call from Aish. They're like apologizing for what happened, and that's very rare, and something like that usually would never have happened. And, you know, what time can I meet? And I'm like, I'm going home. Anyway, so after all that PTSD here in LA till we left, because we were there another week, and I'm running red lights, and I'm like thinking everyone's out to kill me. And I was in Jerusalem. It was almost Rosh Hashanah. And everyone's talking about the Melech, and that's Rosh Hashanah. Everyone's talking about the king. God's the king, Melech. And I was not very excited about Rosh Hashanah because I was the Melech. And I just had my crown removed. And I was brought back to Jerusalem where they have an epidemic of rabbis and nobody needs Rabbi Yom Tov. And And I was really, I was crushed, and I was dreading Rosh Hashanah. Because to call God king when you think you're the king is really, really 2 painful days, Rosh Hashanah. And from some divine stroke of God's will, my Rosh Kollel, Shlomo Ashkenazi of the Boston Kollel in Har Nov, we're all leaving. We're leaving. It's the end of the day. We're all leaving. And he says, Yom Tov, come over here. Let me read you a little piece. And he reads me a little piece about humbling yourself before the Melech, before the king. And we sat there for about a half hour learning Hasidus on Rosh Hashanah and about the shofar and about waking up from the fact that you think you're the king of everything. But on Rosh Hashanah, you finally, that you're not the king. It was all about us thinking we're king and how hard it is for us to coronate God. That's why I notice when we bow to God, like for example in Aleinu L'Shabach, for example, when we bow, you'll notice most men cannot bow. They'll go like this. They give a little token, like they might as well curtsy. They're not really bowing. And you're supposed to go 90 degrees, meaning you're supposed to be flat out 90 degrees. When you say V'anachnu korim u'mishtach, when you say u'mishtach, you're supposed to be at a 90-degree angle there. But men can't do that, and boy, well, could I not do that. And anyway, I finally realized what had happened, and I finally realized that my prayers were answered from Tzfat, that I got to see what it is to be, when you have false humility, is I wound up licking the dust of Los Angeles. I was licking the dust of an alley in Los Angeles with a gun at my head, bowing before some illiterate monster. And at that point also I realized you got to bow to, all of us are going to bow to something. You're going to be bowing to something. You're going to be sacrificing to something. Many people will be sacrificing to money. Many people will be sacrificing to all kinds of things. You're going to be bowing in this life. So you can bow to God, or you're going to wind up bowing to people, you're going to wind up bowing to money, or you're going to wind up bowing to something else. But we're here to bow. And God, yes, He made human beings upright. We're the only animal in the world that's upright. But with that same uprightness, with proper core muscles, as we discussed yesterday, we're created to bow. And our whole life really is only about, will we surrender ourselves? Are we willing to surrender? And God's going to make all of us surrender. And if you don't surrender, you're still going to surrender, because there's something called death, where God will take away all of everything. And we will all, not only will we bow, but we're just going to shrivel up into nothing. And we're going to be worm food, in one day. And so that's humbling. And to make God the king, but to be awesome, because you're awesome. And that's humility, is to be awesome. And think about it. Let's say, David, if you're really awesome and you do the things that are awesome, it's going to be very humbling. It's going to be very humbling, because there's a lot of potential rejection and failure that will come it's not just potential, it will come your way. If all of us accept upon ourselves how awesome we are, created in the image of God, and we start acting that way, not everyone's going to love that. There's going to be rejection. And if you pursue the things that awesome people pursue, there's going to be lots of failures. You'll fail many times. And that's very humbling. And you want to know something? When you fail, when you get rejected and you fail over and over again, it's like mini deaths. It's ego death. Over and over again. Every time you fail and every time you get rejected, you get these mini deaths. And something's amazing about it, because eventually you start breaking through. You start to really achieve. And after a while, you're like really living the purpose you were created for. There's something amazing about this, is that you'll notice there's a correlation between people who know what they're living for and no fear of death. And people who don't know what they're living for are scared of death. And the reason why people who don't know what they're living for are scared of death is because they're afraid to die before they figured it out. They don't want to die because they haven't. First of all, they haven't figured it out, and they haven't done anything about it. Because if you didn't figure it out, you can't do anything about it. So they're scared of dying. The interesting thing is people who do know what they're here for and are living it fully, and they're living very much more fulfilled lives than people who don't know, aren't afraid of death. They should be the most afraid of death because they're living the most fulfilled lives. So they could lose that in death. But yet you'll find the people who are living the most fulfilled lives are the least afraid of death. And I think one of the reasons is, David, is that they've already died many times. Through every rejection, through every failure, every humiliation, everything that happened to them by living awesome in a world that wasn't ready for them. Means you're going to hit a lot of walls, and each wall you hit is a mini death on your path to greatness. What does it mean? Like a practical sense? Well, one thing would be if you're living awesome, so then people who you should be networking with, you would network with them. Whereas, I'm just giving one example, is networking. Like you won't get anywhere without networking in your life. You got to network. But so many of us refuse to speak to the right people because of our fear. Our fear that we're going to feel this big in front of them, and they're not going to be interested in us, and it wouldn't have been worth it to even try to network with those people because they would never, because it's just going to be so painful when they say, who are you, man? Like, who are you? Like, you're a nobody. And so we never get traction because we're afraid to get the rejection of networking with the people that we really need to be networking with to get our purpose fulfilled. Such what purpose?
No, I said, what kind of people should we be networking with?
Oh, that's too specific. Because every one of us, based on our special purpose, is going to be networking with a totally different person, totally different people. What's that?
How do I find my people?
Well, you first have to find your purpose. Once you know your purpose, the people come. You know who your people are. Yeah. How do you find your purpose? That's not for this class right now, but there's. I speak a lot about it. You want me to play a little? Okay, I'll play a little. Whose guitar is it?
Benji's.
Benji. Is it a good guitar?
It's alright.
Someone else had a question? I saw a hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. I know a lot about what you're talking about because I'm very afraid. I know that shit a lot of times.
Shh. Yo, this guy's Sharon. Can you mind filming him, Sharon? Don't get these girls, but just get him. Someone's sharing something private. Up and personal. Yeah, just take the camera. Leave the stand. You have a nice steady hand. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, you were saying?
I was saying that I know what Yom Tov's talking about because I'm afraid of rejection. And a lot of times someone's asking for examples, like I'll be afraid to call someone I don't know about, like looking for a job or anything. Really, I'm just like afraid to like go over to people I don't know and like ask them for things or network with the thing. It's like I relate to that. So
Yeah. Unfortunately, we all relate to that. Who's this lady with all these questions? I love questions, but they usually don't all come from one person. Yeah. Here we go. Whose phone's ringing? Is that question asker? Okay, here we go. I have to remember the words somehow, so. So this song I wrote I was going up the Kotel stairs and when I was first here, and I was sad about the destruction of the temple. And someone said to me, "Why are you so sad?" Oh my gosh, it was your son-in-law. That's so funny. We're talking about like 28 years ago. Your son-in-law was on his way to the Kotel, your father. And he asked me, "Why am I so sad?" And I said it was the temple's destruction was sad for me. And he says, "Don't get sad, get even." Like, do something about it. Like, do something about it. And I went back and I wrote this song. And I've been doing something about it since then. What do you do? What are you gonna do to speed? Sorry, I gotta remember the words. You know what I realized? This room probably doesn't smell much anymore, right? I don't know if your daughter wants to come back. Okay, here we go. What do you do? What do you... Oh my gosh, what a bad start. I haven't played this song in years. Here we go. I'm gonna get it this time. Third time's the charm. What do you do? What are you gonna do to speed the day it comes? What do you do? What are you gonna do to speed the day it comes? Do you wake up with a greeting? Hello, hello. Do you thank him with a smile? Hello, hello. Do you go the extra mile? Hello, I'm calling you. Will you make it through the gates? Oh, yeah, yeah. Whoa. What do you do? What are you gonna do to speed the day it comes? What do you do? What are you gonna do to speed the day it comes? Did you help her when she needed you? Hello, hello. Did you go beyond the law? Hello, hello. Did you stop and take a rest? Hello, I'm calling you to praise the one above. Oh, yeah, yeah. Whoa. What do you do? What are you gonna do to speed the day it comes? What do you do? What are you gonna do to speed the day it comes? Oh, to speed the day it comes. Oh, to speed the day it comes. Oh, I tried to do the best I can, but the doubt can shake the strongest hand. I need help to reach our goal. Through hard deeds, He'll show. What do you do? What are you gonna do to speed the day it comes? What do you do? What are you gonna do to speed the day it comes? What to speed the day it comes? What to speed the day it comes? To speed the day it comes. We are standing at the footsteps. Hello, hello. It is happening today. Hello, hello. Do you hear me when I say hello? I'm calling you to shine and lead the way. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh. Everybody, what do you do? What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do to speed the day it comes? To speed the day it comes. Double click. What do you do? What are you gonna do to speed the day it comes? Flip the screen, the camera. What do you do? Just double click. What are you gonna do to speed the day it comes? Everybody sing. What do you do? What are you gonna do to speed the day it comes? One more time, let's go. What do you do? What are you gonna do to speed going. To speed the day it comes. What to speed the day it comes. What to speed the day it comes. Keep going, speed the day. To speed the day it comes. Loud, let's go. To speed the day it comes. You can put your hands together. Let's go. To speed the day it comes. To speed the day it comes. What to speed the day it comes. What to speed the day it comes. What to speed the day it comes. To speed the day it comes. Wow. That was fun. Anyway, where were we?
Speed the day it comes.
Oh, yeah, so I was going to read you from the, I don't know if you want to invite your mommy back in. I don't think there's any more smell of Lavona. I think she looked like she was a little PO'd that I, smoked her out of the room. So it says like this in the book of Zechariah. So why do we read this? Because our faith, back to that, our faith was locked in with God at Yom Kippur. And then God says, faith, well, okay, let's test your faith. How do you test faith? With trust. How do you test faith? Trust. So our faith was tested with trust. And what's the trust? You're now commanded to leave your home and move out into a thatched hut called a sukkah for a week straight. Stop trusting your home with your reinforced concrete and your lock on your door and your alarm system and your surveillance cameras, and just move outside and trust. You know, CNN once had a report on television. It showed all these Hasidim with boards on the border of East Jerusalem. You know, there's the Kvish Achad, it's the border between East and West Jerusalem. East Jerusalem's the Arab, West Jerusalem's Jews, and on the border is where all these Breslivers live. And CNN showed them with these big boards, and it says on the news report, it says, here you can see Orthodox Jewish men boarding up their homes. It was during the height of the Intifada. Like, things were crazy here. Buses blowing up everywhere. Like, people getting, people were getting hurt in the streets. Like, it was crazy. Total unrest in 2002, I think. Anyway, so they said, Orthodox Jews boarding up their homes on the border of East Jerusalem. You know what these guys were doing? They were building sukkahs. They were moving outdoors, like literally in a stone's throw away from East Jerusalem, building sukkot and moving into those sukkot to eat, drink, sleep. No one's protecting while you sleep the night. God's protecting. And so we have to show the trust. And that's when we read this, because when it gets rough out there, and it's going to get rough, as you'll hear, when it gets rough out there, you're going to have to trust. You have to not make in your underwear. Okay? You got to actually keep cool and know what to do. You have to follow the lines to the nearest exit. Behold, God's awaited day is coming. And this is Zechariah chapter 14. Behold, God's awaited day is coming. It's called the awaited day. We've been all waiting for this day. And your spoils will be divided in your midst. I shall gather all the nations to Jerusalem to wage war. And this has everything to do with BDS and all that stuff. There's going to be this massive battle. I will gather all the nations, not some of the nations, all the nations, to Jerusalem to wage war. The city will be conquered, the homes plundered, and the women violated. Half the city will go into exile. But the rest of the people will not be cut off from the city. Then God himself will go out and wage war against those nations, as on the day he warred the day of battle. I don't know what that's referring to. No note on that. I'm sure it's in the bigger versions, meaning where there's more commentaries. On that day, his feet, God's feet, capital H, God's feet, will stand astride the Mount of Olives. By the way, God doesn't have feet. So I don't know what it means that his feet will stand astride the Mount of Olives, which faces Jerusalem on the east. And literally, like right outside this window, can you take this guitar? That's why you never put a guitar strap on the neck. It belongs there. Which is a 5-minute experience in a music store. And so the Mount of Olives, which is right outside here, hey, Cindy Klein said, isn't it that negative prophecies do not have to come true? Yeah, that's true. But anyway, that's all the Mount of Olives up there. You can see that's up top with those arches is the Intercontinental Hotel, which was built on great Jewish graves. The state of Israel let them do that. And it's, there's actually, they used, some of the construction has tombstones, if you look carefully, that they used the actual tombstones for that. So it says, continuing on, sorry about this crazy production here. I'm not much of a video producer. So the answer is, by the way, that there's two options for the end of days. It's either going to come through. Sorry. It's all right. It's either going to come from great light or it's going to come from tribulation. I hope it comes through great light, but it could also come from tribulation because things seem to be getting worse, not better. Anyway, what's that? Yetzer? Amen. On that day, his feet will stand astride the Mount of Olives, which faces Jerusalem on the east, which I just showed you. And the Mount of Olives will split at its center, eastward and westward. So half the mountain's going to split this way. The other half's going to split that way, which is going to have a north-south valley right in the center of the mountain, making a huge ravine. Half the mountain will move northward and half the mountain southward, which is a little strange because that's just hard to make sense of. We just had a huge ravine east-west with a ravine going north-south. And then it says half the mountain's moving north and half the mountain's moving south, which I guess would mean that it's going to split again into fours. And then there would just, I guess, be a big gap in the middle between the two. So it's no longer a ravine, it's now a big gap in the middle. And then you will flee. I guess the Jews are going to flee. I imagine that's the Jews. I don't have all the commentaries here right now. For the ravine will extend to Atzel, which is a place. You will flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of King Uzziah of Judah. Then Hashem, my God, will come with all the angels to your aid. And it will happen on that day that there will be neither clear light nor heavy darkness. This will go on for a whole day, understood only by Hashem. Neither day nor night, but toward evening it will be perceived as light. It will be on that day that fresh water will flow from Jerusalem, half to the eastern sea and half backward to the west, which is, the west would be the Mediterranean Sea, Dead Sea, Mediterranean Sea. In summer and winter the flow will continue. Hashem will be king over all the world, and on that day his name, Hashem will be one and his name will be one. The entire area will be transformed to a plain, a flat plain. From the hill of Rimmon south of Jerusalem, the city will rise high to its original site. From the gate of Benjamin until the place of the first gate to the inner gate, and from the tower of Hananel to the royal wine cellar. They will dwell within her, and destruction shall be no more. Jerusalem shall dwell secure. This will be the plague with which Hashem will smite all nations that rallied against Jerusalem. Their flesh, listen to this is nuclear here. Listen to this, their flesh will rot while they stand erect. That's probably nuclear. Think about that. Like, what would cause someone's flesh to rot while they're still standing there? Their eyes will rot in their sockets, and their tongue will rot in their mouths. On that day, which means it's going to be a day, this isn't like a long period of rotting, because rot usually means time. So it's not a time thing. It's just more the thing that's going to take place. On that day, there will be a great confusion from Hashem upon them. And when someone will seek to grasp his comrade's hands, he will overpower his comrade's hand. Even Judah will be forced to attack Jerusalem. Whoa. Judah means the Jews, meaning the tribe of Judah, which is like the current leadership, the Knesset, basically. Even Judah will be forced to attack Jerusalem. The wealth of all the surrounding nations will be gathered in a great abundance of gold, silver, and garments. Similar will be the plague against the horses, mules, camels, donkeys, and all the animals that will be in those camps, like the above plague. So the same rotting will happen to all those animals. And it will happen that all who will be left from among all the nations that came up against Jerusalem, they will ascend every year to prostrate themselves before the King, God, Master of Legions, and to celebrate the festival of Sukkot. And any of the families of the land that will not ascend to Jerusalem to prostrate themselves to the King, Hashem, Master of Legions, the rain will not fall upon them. Anyone who doesn't come up will not get rain on their land. And if the family of Egypt will not ascend and will not come, and the lack of rain does not affect them because they have the Nile, it overflows from the giant mountains of Africa overflow the Nile. Egypt doesn't need rain ever. You know that? Egypt needs none of their own rain. The Nile gets filled from the other mountains. So it mentions them. It says, and if the Egyptians don't raise, and the lack of rain that doesn't affect them, they will suffer the plague with which Hashem will inflict the nations, because they will not have ascended to celebrate the festival of Sukkot. You realize, like, Gentiles, like, show me religions, you know what religions are, those man-made things. Show me where they have non-practitioners of their tradition commanded to come as they are to bring their offerings. Here it says, this is like serious business here for the nations to come bring their offerings. This will be the punishment of Egypt and the punishment of all nations that will not ascend to celebrate the festival of Sukkot. This is a good reason to have Gentiles in your sukkah. I'm serious. There's more about Gentiles celebrating Sukkot than Jews here. You realize, like, put Gentiles in your sukkah. No, it's just showing you there's a strong.
Isn't Sukkot the holiday for like all the nations?
It's the nation's holiday. Yeah, they brought 70 cows to offer, representing the 70 nations. On that day, the bells of the horses will make a sanctification of Hashem. They will become cauldrons in the house of Hashem, as the numerous basins before the altar. Every cauldron in Jerusalem and Judah will be sanctified to Hashem, Master of Legions, and all who bring offerings will come and take from them to cook in them. And traders will no longer be in the house of Hashem on that day. Traders. No more trade.
Wow.
Traders
like merchants.
Traders like trade people.
Yeah. So, just to give you, I'll read a little more. This is from Ezekiel. That was from Zechariah. A little more from Ezekiel, because we read on Shabbat of Chol Hamoed Sukkot, we also read from about this stuff. It shall be on that day, on the day that Gog is a nation. We're not sure who they are exactly. That Gog comes on the soil of Israel the words of the Lord Hashem Elohim. My raging anger shall flare up, for my indignation. For in my indignation and in my blazing wrath I have spoken. I take an oath that on that day, meaning the day that Og comes upon the land of Israel, a great earthquake shall come to the soil of Israel, and there shall quake before me the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, beasts of the field, all creeping things that move on the ground, and every human being on the face of the earth. Mountains shall be overthrown, cliffs shall topple, and every wall shall topple to the ground. Whoa, nasty earthquake. I will summon the sword against him who to all my mountains. The words of Lord Elohim. Every man's sword shall be against his brother. I will punish him with pestilence and blood, torrential rain, hailstones, and sulfurous fire. Upon him, this is Gog, upon him and his cohorts, and the many peoples that are with him. Thus will I be exalted and sanctified, and I will become known in the eyes of many nations, and they shall know that I am Hashem. Basically, some like serious nation's going to make war against Israel, and they're going to get it. Anyway, it's an amazing thing about these battles. The other king is called Magog. I will dispatch a fire against Magog and against those who dwell confidently in the islands. They're from islands, I guess. And they shall know that I'm Hashem.
That was going to be Gog versus Magog.
Is it? We started with Gog. It's then it mentions it's going to be a 7-year period, this whole thing.
But I thought it was one day. You said like this whole thing's one day.
It says, basically it says Israel's going to get up and defend themselves and vanquish these enemies. I'll just read the last paragraph. On that day I shall assign to Gog a burial site there in Israel, the Valley of the Travelers. It's the Valley of the Travelers. Let's see what it says in Hebrew. Gay Hamon. I don't know what that is. Anyway, the Valley of the Travelers, and there they will bury Gog and all his horde, and call it the Valley of Gog's horde. The family of Israel will bury them for 7 months in order to cleanse the land. All the people of the land will bury, and it will cause them renown. The day I manifest my glory, the words of Hashem. They will designate permanent officials passing through the land, burying it with passerby, those that remain on the open field in order to cleanse the land. After 7 months they are to seek out. As the passerby traverse the land and see a human bone, then they shall build a marker near it until the buriers bury it in the valley of Gog's horde. There shall also be a city called Hamona. Thus will they cleanse the land. Don't ask me. It sounds pretty gory. Hopefully none of that stuff has to happen. And but definitely it sounds like hardball. So we got to be prepared. And what I started this whole class with is, if you live outside the land of Israel, that's not going to be good. Meaning you want to be here in the land of Israel for this period of time. And it's also for those who believe that Mashiach had to come before the Jews came back to Israel. You know, like there's people who live in like Williamsburg or something like that believe these things. That you know, like the reason we're not going to Israel now is because, you know, it's a secular state and secular people brought all the Jews back, and it wasn't messianic. So how do they explain this? Because this says the people of Israel are here before Mashiach. Before the advent of the Mashiach, there's the Jews are here. You understand? Like, you can't get clearer than that the Jews are going to be here before Mashiach comes. Well, how do you get the Jews here without Mashiach coming? And the answer is on the wings of eagles, which is what the prophet says, that the Jews will come back to Israel on the wings of eagles. Now, how are Jews going to fly on the wings of eagles? That doesn't make any sense. Because all birds carry their young in their talons, including eagles. They carry their birds in the talons. Rashi actually says on the wings of eagles that eagles, because they're the king of the air, they can carry the reason they carry their talons is because they got to protect from above from their birds getting attacked. Whereas eagles that are the kings of the air, they don't need to protect from anyone. So their chicks can line their wings. They don't actually do this. The reason birds carry their young in their talons is so they don't go flying off. You understand? These are little birds fly themselves. They don't need their mothers. But if a bird has to move a non-flying bird, it uses its talons to fly it. You understand? Birds don't need their parents much, except at the beginning. So, but if you'll notice, next time you're in an airplane flying to the land of Israel, you'll notice you're in a giant tube of, filled with Jews usually, and some other pilgrims. But if you look down, you'll see you're on the wings. The wings are down below you. And it says in the prophets that God will bring us home on the wings of eagles, and which is very strange. But think about it. I mean, if you've watched a bird soar in the updrafts, they don't even flap their wings; they're just soaring like that. That is the airplane. The airplane was created off the bird. Like that is an airplane. The airplane is the modern day bird, and when it says the Jews will come home on the wings of eagles, it's literally on the wings of eagles,
Also,
on the wings of giant
eagles
birds.
are the birds that can soar for the longest without flight.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, I'm not saying everyone has to move here tomorrow. I'm just saying that not to have a plan would be irresponsible. And you can update your plan, meaning if you made a 5-year plan that you're moving to Israel and you get to the 5th year, you can add 5 years. But because your family and you are talking about readiness, and like it's clear that we're moving back to the land of Israel, and you have a deadline for that. So, which again, it can be revised, but not to have that is just shows a lack of faith in our prophets and a lack of trust. And so that's what we got to do. Shalom, everybody. I'm sorry. Thursdays, we feed a family every Thursday. This rabbi goes and gets food for people. Please, this class is how that family eats. So if you give anything that folds, it will create fish or meat. If it jingles, it buys Pringles, or drinks. And please give to this family generously, and you'll enjoy Shabbos more, knowing that you helped the family make Shabbos. Okay, please click on everything and subscribe if it's subscribe, or share if you're on Facebook, and let's do it. And I'll obviously join the media club. Please help support getting the message out there. Shalom.